So every 39 seconds, a website gets hacked or attacked. And in fact, every day, 30,000 websites get attacked as well. And this number is increasing 13% by every year. So it is extremely important to study the account aspect, authentication and access control aspect of these web services. Before I go ahead with the presentation, I want to mention that we will be talking about several countries, and we won't be mentioning terms such as like developing or developed nations or third world countries. I will be using Global South and Global North, but there should be a better phrasing to represent these countries, but I'm still searching for it. So if anybody has any suggestions, I'm open for that. So this work has been done in collaboration with Philipp from Ruhr University, Bochum, who is a collaborator and has been working with me on this project, as well as my PhD student, Andrick, who is at the University of Denver. So what is account remediation? It is a set of protocols to transform a compromised account into one that is again entirely under the user's control. This process includes several steps, including the mechanism of resetting passwords, turning on two-factor authentication, security verification checks, or account deletion. However, these processes which we see and which should be obvious in many web services is not that easy. In fact, last night when I was preparing for this presentation, I tried to get hold of the account remediation of the usual accounts which I use, right? Such as Outlook or Twitter or any other like social media as well. And on an average, it took for 5 accounts, it took me like about 15 minutes to just get to that particular settings so that I can delete my account or reset my account. And many of these web services do not even have that. So this work has been motivated by a prior work, Neil et al., which is already cited multiple times in our paper, and I definitely recommend going over it. So they analyzed US-based websites and identified 5 account remediation steps, one of which was discovering of a compromise when it happens in a web service, then recovering of an account, how to do that. Third is limiting the access to a compromised account. Fourth is restoring services if that account was compromised. And fifth was preventing future compromise. And then thereafter, they provided advices and recommendations for the web services, and particularly for the US-based web services. They found that not many of these web services have any details provided for the users, and they analyzed about 57 of these web services. So from an analysis of US-based website, we wanted to analyze the websites popular across the globe, right? We wanted to see globally what's the situation. So we took 5 continents, Africa, the Americas, Asia, Europe, and Oceania. And for every continent, we selected 6 countries, 3 best and 3 worst based on the Global Cybersecurity Index. And out of which we collected 50 top web services used from the Tranco's list. So a total we got about 1,500 websites, but we removed the duplicates because most of these websites were used by these different countries, right? So we found 158 unique web services, which we conducted our analysis on. So these were the best countries, as you can see. In Africa, it was Mauritius, Ghana. Worst countries were Burundi. USA, Canada was good, but then there was Honduras and Haiti, which was on the worst index as well, and so on. More details about this is provided in the paper as well. So what we found out was, first, there was lack of information present across the nations. So that was a common phenomena. So they were not providing any information to the user. What happens if an account gets compromised? Yes, you reset the password, but how do you get notified about a compromise happening in the first place? We all talk about authentication, two-factor authentication, and in fact, my dissertation was on 2FA. And this is actually a social bubble where we talk about security all the time. But when we go outside of it, we find out that several of these websites don't even have the possibility of 2FA. And as we probably all know what Twitter is doing, that they are even removing the basic aspects of text-based 2FA from the non-premium subscriberless accounts, right? So what we found out was all of these components, compromise discovery, account recovery, limited unwanted access, service restoration, or prevent future compromise was not there. In fact, I have lost a few of my own accounts, one of them being like Google account where I did not have a backup email and could not reset my password, right? So just imagine if this is happening right now, our email address is associated with our financial accounts as well, so that can just carry forward. So what we found out was about 49 to 54% of these websites reported about any compromise discovery. So that means about half of these websites which we analyzed never even reports to the user. So the users are not even aware that their account was compromised. 69 to 77% talked about account recovery, which was great, but it was also their business model to retain their customers, so which was also one of that. But that also shows that about 20 to 25% of these websites are not even talking about how to recover your account in the first place. And as we know, these web services do not have a customer care all the time so that we can interact with them. 42 to 52% of them are not even talking about any limited access control, right? How can you limit it? How can you have a stronger password authentication schema? Those were not even discussed. 40 to 50%, 52% of these websites were talking about service restoration. Even if they were paid or premium account, then only they were getting this feature in the first place. And if there was not a paid account, they were not even getting that option. Now, 37 to 43% of these accounts talked about preventing future compromise. So we are, first of all, not even providing tools to the users, not even informing them that their account is compromised. And second of all, if there is a compromise happening, we are not even telling them how to prevent it. We all talk about training, notification, and so on, but we need to provide the tools to the users first. So Global South, significantly more affected by the lack of advice. There was no advice available. They were all going online and trying to find out their solutions there. So one of the examples being there were billing and financial issues, and lowest ranked Oceania countries, about 32%, had no information from their websites how to resolve that. And we are talking about financial information, credit card information, and so on, which can be out there. Another example was on password advice. So again, in Oceania, we found that 47% of these websites were not even talking about how to have a stronger password, right? Let alone be preventing them. So all the studies which we did like 20 years back, where 1, 2, 3, 4 was the common password, or maybe like I love you was the best phrase to be used as passwords, people are still using it, and these web services are not even preventing those. So what we want to discuss is account deletion is an option, right? Users may want to delete their accounts, and 20% of these websites do not even provide information on account deletion. And going back to the GDPR or other privacy policies which we are emerging, we are first talking about the right to deletion. So the websites are not even providing you with that option. So that is definitely not compliant. Enforcing account remediation procedures. So for all websites that maintain user accounts similar to data breach notification laws in the US or GDPR in the EU, they were not even talking about how to have these protocols in the first place. And honestly, before I read that Neil et al.'s paper, I did not even know we were using phrasing such as account remediation in a global scale. Providing guidance for the users and websites providers for sure. So general advice for users if steps are missing on the websites, how to kind of restore it. And best practices for websites provided on how to improve, right? We always, when we are talking about usable security, mostly the concerns are from the end user perspective, which is really great. But we also have to think about from the developer side. Whenever I talk to different developers, they are very confused. There is a privacy policy emerging every day, and they don't know how to make it compliant. So it is extremely important to give them like steps. Okay, this is how you can make your account compliant and you can make your website secure and so forth. So just to recap, first what we did was we collected these websites and analyzed based on these codebook. There were a total of 270 codebooks, which is there provided in the appendix of our paper as well. So mostly we were talking about discovering how to discover a compromise and what they were doing, and how to recover an account and what should be the next steps from the user and the developer side. And third thing is how to limit access to make sure that legit users are having their account access there, but also people who should not have access are getting revoked as well. Fourth is how to restore the service and preventing future access, right? So we have analyzed 158 websites, popular websites across all 5 continents. Now just imagine we were talking about all these 50 most popular websites from it. What happens when we have other websites associated which people don't even use that much, right? So that can be another concern for sure. So of course, we discussed in detail about like the lack of information present, Global South, which is significantly affected. Another thing which I want to add is we are talking about the Global South, which probably does not have a lot of financial resources to support these web services, right? So we have to focus on how we can improve those cybersecurity perspective. And as I said, account deletion and all of these other aspects should be focused as well. As a future direction, what we are already working on, me and my collaborators, is creating a simulation on these account remediation protocols. And we are particularly focusing on social media websites at the moment, the top 10. And then we are working on, from the user side, conducting user studies to understand from them what their perspective is of account remediation. Because if I just mention account remediation, even in this particular security social bubble, there might be people who do not know exactly what the steps need to be done, right? So we want to analyze that, and we are providing them with a secure version of it and trying to see the efficacy, how it can be different. And for that, we are particularly focusing on sessions. So these are our contact details. I'm happy to take more questions, but as I said, feel free to contact my collaborators as well. Thank you.
So I kind of have 2 questions. First of all, in terms of how you actually chose the web pages. Now you say in terms of like the most popular ones, but I was considering perhaps you will find some pages in general in some of the smaller countries where there will not be as much, let's say, vital information that can be stored. Perhaps it's just a simple weather website. So I don't know if that's something you looked into. And the second question is, I don't know if there was anything you noticed in terms of like web pages with provided third-party logins, for example.
Yeah, I'll probably ask the second question again, but a very interesting one for the first. So one of the filters which is mentioned in the paper is we made sure that there is a possibility of account creation because we were looking into account remediation. So once we had those websites, we only selected the ones where they could create an account and they could reset. At least there is a password authentication feature in the first place. Sometimes it also means that guest logins was there, but at least there needs to be an OTP or some kind of authentication schema at place. So that was one of the filters to select the top 50. Yeah, and sorry, what was the second question?
The second question, if you provided like some kind of third-party login, I assume if I was a smaller web page, or let's say not as I want to handle security myself, or perhaps just log in with Google. Is that something you?
Yeah, so for this particular project, just because we wanted to remove the variance of social logins, we did not look into that, but that is very interesting. The other reason is like because we were particularly analyzing like one particular organization, if we added that third party or social login perspective, then it would add the variance of, again, right, like whether it's Google's fault, like, or if there is a privacy breach or security breach, or say suppose Facebook through which they are logging in, or Apple, versus the particular account. So we particularly wanted to focus on that account. But that's very interesting. We might want to add that in the future, which we are still working on.
Thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you so much.
So I have 2 questions. The first question is, do you think there will be any differences in the way these websites are localized in different languages in these countries? Because I'm assuming the websites will be served differently to different people. Do you see a challenge in the way the localization happens on different websites?
Very interesting question, and yes, I want to study that. What we started doing where we were collecting, just to mention, another filter was like these were all like websites available in English so that we don't translate, because there are several issues as we know from the translation perspective. But if I get the funding, I want to actually have people who can translate it, who know the language, and then kind of work towards it. That is definitely in the plans. I can cover, like, fortunately I know a few languages by myself, so I worked on some of those. I'm from India, so like those Indian websites and so on. Like for example, German websites, I unfortunately don't know, or Spanish, so that's why I want people to be hired from there. I have applied for a grant for this, so fingers crossed. But yeah.
All the best. And the second question was, do you know of any offline ways of getting an account back? For example, I can just go to my local bank and get that account instead of applying for an online website.
That's very interesting as well, and just so that I think a lot of people know that, but just to kind of reiterate, many of these Global South people, users, actually prefer going to offline aspects, and then including me, then that's how I kind of like authenticate as well, the geographical authentication. But during COVID, that was again not possible, right? So we have not looked into it, but definitely that's something to explore. But that is, again, from the convenience side, that's an issue. If we are going back to like 50 years and making people to just go offline, that means that we are not doing our job correctly. But definitely very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, interesting talk. Before remediation happens, what's your opinion? Of course, outlook on confounding the effect of password managers who try to be preemptive into suggesting that, well, you're reusing a password, they might be before happening.
Very interesting. Of course, like in my expert personally, also my personal opinion, password manager should be used. But as we know, I'm not naming the company, there was a huge password manager breach as well. So first of all, people don't even use password managers outside. Like I'm talking about people who are not that much technically savvy, right? And second of all, if they see these kind of news, like I have a class which I'm teaching on human-centered data security and privacy, and the first day they asked, what happens to the master password if that gets hacked? Right? That's something a concern for every password manager. So definitely people should use it, and that should be encouraged. That's why hopefully that is even if it's recorded, but I do not support this particular notion of removing text-based passwords, because first of all, people are not even doing 2FA. And I know text-based 2FA are not the best, but at least there was a second level of authentication. Like password managers was at least helping the users in certain way to not have 1, 2, 3, 4 as a password, right? So we should encourage it. But these websites are not even into the basic aspect of what happens if a compromise happens, to just notify, right? That should be the first step in the first place, and also to kind of motivate. So to answer your question, yes, there should be these mechanisms, and there should be a seamless mechanism so that they don't have to do those additional steps. These websites itself kind of have those mechanisms in place, so once they log in, they should have the option. Do you want to add it as passwords, which many of the websites already do.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So they do centralize, right? Then the question is like, what happens when we make it like all in one? Then people only need to attack that one, right? So there needs to be a hybrid approach.